Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yeah, baby. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. How are you doing? Are you ready? You ready for that Tuesday deep dive? You know what I'm talking about. We call it Truth Tuesdays. We're not saying anything about the pain and suffering that's coming with it. We're just saying it's Truth Tuesdays. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is waiting in the wings, ready to go, and going over the three big topics for the weekly top three today, which include the recap of the primaries, some discussions on permanent fund reform, and then oil and tax misinformation. So we got a lot of stuff to handle this morning. In hour two, we'll do a bit of a recap, plus some other headlines, some good news that's going on around the state that you should be aware of. And then finally, we'll be finishing up, as always, on our Tuesdays with Chris Story, who comes in to give us our weekly life coaching lesson. It's an uplift. It's an uplift, kind of a positivity segment. So that's coming up next in hour two this morning. So let's just get started. Let's get started and dive into this right now. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, joins us, and we're going to get crack-a-lack in here. Good morning, my friend. How are you doing this morning?
Michael, I'm doing great today. I've got a question. Have you ever
Yes.
had Terry on as a guest?
Yes, I have. Terry has been on the program before with me, but not in quite a few years. She's yeah.
Terry, for those listening who don't know, Terry is Michael's wife, and she has some of the greatest comedy posts that's coming out of her head on Facebook, on her Facebook page. And I would recommend her as a guest at some point.
Oh yeah. I mean, the problem is she'd have to be in here with me, and then it'd be like two of us in the same. No, Terry is definitely proof that I punch way above my weight class, and I'm a hell of a salesman. That's what Terry proves in my life. That's for sure. We just, by the way, we just celebrated our 33rd anniversary on Friday. So we've been around each other for a while, so we know exactly what's going on. But yeah, she's a little bit of a comedic genius on Facebook. She has some fun stuff out there.
Congratulations on the anniversary.
Well, thank you so much. You could thank her more than anything else. So she's the one that puts up with all of this stuff here. So it's all good. Brad, let's dive into this, shall we? Let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about the primaries. Not a huge amount of surprise there. A couple things that were interesting. And then, of course, the news post-primary has also been very interesting. But take it away, my friend.
Yeah, the news post-primary may be as interesting as the primary itself. The people who are dropping out. Last night, Nick Moe, who was the only candidate opposing Carolyn Hall in House District in West Anchorage, dropped out, leaving Carolyn Hall as the only candidate in that race, which is not good for those who are concerned about the PFD and fiscal policy, but it's a development. I've looked at the primary results from a couple of perspectives. One, I think they've helped clarify the positions of the candidates as they've had to write in response to the Alaska Beacon survey request, and as they've spoken on the issue and posted, had their websites up and other things. And I think that's helped clarify to some degree my reaction or my thoughts about the candidates. And the other, I think the primary has helped clarify the races where support or contributions, maybe they're the same thing, would be helpful. So using those criteria or using that background, I've applied 3 criteria to sort of analyze the results in the races, and looked at the candidates from the standpoint of the position on fiscal issues, whether the candidate who from my perspective has the strongest position on fiscal issues is winnable in a race, and where support or cash may make a difference. And I've tried to identify candidates where I think that those criteria sort of apply and candidates sort of rise to the top. I've identified 6 or 5 candidates that just absolutely rise to the top on those criteria. Certainly, Ben Carpenter is at the top of the list in the Kenai Senate District, Senate District D, where he faces off against incumbent Jesse Bjorkman. That's a close race. Bjorkman was slightly ahead in the primary, but Ben was close behind him, and I think it's going to stay a close race through the remainder of the cycle. Ben certainly is strong on fiscal issues that I care about. I think he's has a good focus on keeping the budget under control, but also dealing with the PFD issue and dealing with an equitable revenue approach to dealing with the deficits that the budgets continually reveal. And I think Ben certainly is a candidate that I'm going to spend a lot more time on talking about and a lot more time on focusing with contributions. I made another contribution the day after the primary, given his strong showing. Another one that falls in that category is going to be a surprise to some. Frankly, it was a surprise even to me as I sort of sorted through candidate positions and sorted through the results of the primary. Candidate Moran in House District 1, Agnes Moran in House District 1, has a very strong position on the PFD and a very strong position on the budget. Here's what she told the Beacon, if I can dig it up real quick. Here's what she told the Beacon with respect to the PFD. Quote, I strongly support a 50-50 PFD. The research is clear. A cut in the PFD is a tax, the most regressive tax we have at our disposal. PFD cuts have the largest adverse impact on Alaska's economy and push tens of thousands of Alaskans into poverty. These cuts ensure that non-residents, the top 1%, the top 5%, do not pay their fair share for government services. I understand that a 50-50 PFD will require a fundamental reevaluation of the state's budget. We need to consider revenue options that do not disproportionately harm middle and lower income Alaska families, ensure that non-residents pay their fair share for government services, and tackle the state's spending problem. I'm not sure I could have written anything. I'm not sure I would have written anything any different in response to that.
Right.
So I think Agnes is certainly, to me on the House side, is a very strong candidate. That's going to be House District 1 is a very, the 3 candidates finished very close to each other. Jeremy Bynum was out in front of the Republican candidate, but Agnes was right in there with the Democrat candidate. So that race I'm going to pay a lot of attention to.
That race was interesting because she had some good responses to several ones, but then I noticed that she also it was kind of it was a median walk. She walked some different things, like on the ranked choice voting, she supported ranked choice voting and a couple other things. But again, when you have 2 nonpartisan or non-affiliated candidates and a Republican, I guess it's up to them to kind of duke it out between the 2 of them before they fight it up with a Republican, I guess.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Agnes ran as a Republican in that district in 2012 and 2014. She ran against Dan Ortiz when Dan Ortiz first got elected. She ran in the Republican primary. And she ran in the Republican primary also in 2012. So she has a Republican background. That district is a little wonky. I mean, Ortiz was elected as an I down there. So I don't begrudge her running outside of running as an N, nonpartisan. And I am, and nobody's going to be a perfect candidate on all the issues.
Sure.
From my standpoint, the fiscal issues are the top issue. Because if
we I just think it's interesting that, again, especially because you have to focus it the way the district is. And as you said, Ortiz was an independent, although he caucused with the Democrats, but that seems to garner more attention in that district than anything else. They may not be on the partisan bandwagon one way or the other.
Yeah. So I think I'm excited for that campaign. I'm excited for her results. She finished third, but it was a very close third. And I think ranked choice voting is going to play a big role in how that district ultimately plays out. So that's a candidate that I'm going to support there. House District 6, Sarah Vance has some opposition. She finished first in the primary, but it's not a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination. That's going to come down to being a very well fought out race as well. And I think supporting Sarah in that district is going to be important. House District 8. This is Ben Carpenter's old House district. There are two candidates there: John Hillier and Bill Elam. Bill Elam's on the Kenai Peninsula Borough. John doesn't have a political background, but John comes across as sort of the Ben Carpenter successor in that district.
Right.
Certainly has good positions on the PFD. Talks about in his fiscal plan, talks about the fiscal policy working group, and I think that's going to be a race I focus on also. Mia Costello in House District 15. Mia doesn't have the world's best responses on the PFD and on the budget in her responses to the Beacon, but her voting record in the Senate. Remember, she was in the Senate before she was defeated by Matt Clayman. Her voting record in the Senate was a very strong PFD position, and I think speaks well for her. That's going to be a tough race. Her opponent, Danny Wells, is extremely well funded, but Mia finished first in that primary and has demonstrated a strong track record in that district. So I think that's going to be a good race to watch and follow. Frank Chomaszewski, up in Fairbanks, House District 34. That primary may have been a little tighter than I think people anticipated, I anticipated. And Frank's got some opposition from Joy Beth Cottle, who has an R behind her name. Frank,
but again, going back to history, is not an R. Let me just point that out.
Yeah, it's one of those. I think Frank is more in line with Rob Myers' position. Rob Myers is a senator from that district, and I think Frank's more in line with Rob's positions on things, and I think that's a strong race. And I wouldn't want to see that seat flip away from somebody who's fairly strong on fiscal policy issues. So those are the six that for me are most important coming out of the primary. There's a few I've got some questions on. I'm going to follow and see where the race goes. Jared Gecker in Senate District L against Kelly. He's got good positions. He certainly seems to be a stronger fiscal conservative than the current senator is. But he doesn't come across strong on the PFD. It's a bit of a wishy-washy position on the PFD, and I don't want to go all out for somebody who's just going to get in there and on that issue and other fiscal issues just sort of be wishy-washy. Rob Yunt in Senate District N against David. The Valley. David has been extremely wishy-washy on the PFD and on fiscal issues. As a member of the Senate Finance Committee, he's voted with the majority a lot of the times on increased spending and on using the PFD to fund the PFD cuts to fund the increased spending. So I want to lean toward Yunt, but and I want to help Yunt, but I'm not quite convinced yet where he lands on those issues. So I'm going to follow that more. Mike Cronk, I will give credit to Cronk in his written statements. He talked about a complete fiscal plan, which I took as sort of a different way of saying the fiscal policy working group. That's going to be a tight race there as well against Savannah. So I want to favor Cronk, and I'm strongly considering Cronk, but haven't gotten over the line yet. And then there are two districts that I just don't know what the hell to do. One is HD 28, House District 28 in the Valley that Jesse Sumner represented. But Sumner stepping out of that race leaves it sort of a void. You sort of wish if Sumner was going to do that, he would have done it before the filing date.
Yeah.
So you could have had somebody, people consider running in that district that would replace Jesse, as opposed to waiting on him to drop out after the primary. It looks like Steve Menard, who carries the Curtis Menard name in that race, is a strong candidate, and Lexi Moore is a strong candidate. But it's hard to tell the difference between the two right now. Alexi Moore is one of those candidates who says, I'm a strong defender of PFD, but no taxes. Well, that doesn't quite work. The deficits are too big to close by spending cuts alone. So if you're saying you're strong on the PFD but no taxes, I'm not sure how you get to a strong PFD if you're not going to use an alternative revenue to pay for the deficit. And then House District 36, Cronk's old district.
Right.
Brandon Kowalski, a Democrat, who nevertheless articulates very strong positions on the PFD and on fiscal policy, and Rebecca Schwanke, who finished at the top on the R side. I'm going to follow that district also, but I'm not sure how the positions are going to evolve as the campaign goes on. So those are the top races for me that I've seen come out of the primary.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Number 2 is Dead Ahead. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now with Brad Keithley. 34 or 36 is an interesting race. I don't know if you got a chance to watch the interviews with Cole Snodgrass in that race. One of the most impressive candidates, freshman or otherwise, that I've had a chance to interview. Rebecca Schwanke also did very well, in my opinion, during our interview. But Cole really impressed me. But he also said that if he did not come in first on the Republican side, he would drop out. So
and he's already dropped out. I mean,
yeah,
I agree with you. He sort of like Agnes Moran. He was sort of a surprise in how strong he was on fiscal issues, and I was pleased as I was reading through the summaries to see that. I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in playing in that particular primary, but I was looking at his results, and I was hopeful that he would finish strong. He did, but then he dropped out. So.
Yeah. It's hard, but I mean, I think he did the right thing. I mean, because that's what he had committed to. And of course, that's the problem in part with ranked choice voting, is that you get these good candidates that continue to duke it out with each other versus, having one solid candidate that you could at least get behind. So it's a bit frustrating. But those were the two candidates that I was hoping would come out on top. We'll see what happens there, but yeah, definitely an interesting district to watch as it percolates along, so to speak.
Kowalski strikes me, just reading and looking at the website and sort of listening to his stuff. It strikes me as a Bush Democrat. I mean, as literally, somebody who is in the same camp as Neil Foster, and talks a good game on fiscal policy, but you sort of wonder when the rubber meets the road and they start talking about cutting the budget, and the Bush caucus always is concerned that they're going to be the first to be cut. Whether he caves on fiscal issues as a result of that. So, as I say, he talks a good game in the stuff that he's talked about and written and articulated. But there's just something there that concerns me.
What's your overall take on the primary? Give me a overall ranking as you look at the primary. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I guess I would summarize it by saying those who I think have very good fiscal positions, those who I would look to be leaders on that issue in the next legislature, and want to be leaders on that issue in the next legislature. They are close. A lot of them are close. Like Ben is close. Agnes is right up there in House District 1. Sarah Vance certainly is close, but they're not there yet. And so I think it's going to take support for those candidates who I want to see as leaders on fiscal issues in the next session. I think it's going to take support to get them over the line. There's none that I would say just pushed away the opposition and it's over and you don't need to worry about it. So it's I think the primary. I mean, the primary is not a huge indicator of the general, because
look at
low.
The participation rate was the lowest in years at this point. Just barely over 15%. So I don't think that you're going to see. I think you'll see a lot different, especially with the presidential bump and everything else. I think it's going to be a whole different game in November.
Yeah, but you got to. But I mean, one of the things I did look at is are they close? I mean, you had candidates who had good positions running against incumbents, but the incumbents got more than 55% or 60%. So you really got to wonder whether they're close enough to be able to get over that gap.
To overcome. Like I said, it's a straw poll essentially at this point. So it'll be interesting to see where things lay out, especially in comparatives. We'll have a field day with primary to general comparatives when it's all said and done. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Please like, share, subscribe. Let's do all that kind of stuff. Here we go. Right now.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Man, that guy's as mean as Brad is. All right. We got to continue on the weekly top 3. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Number 2. We're going to talk about permanent fund reform. This is an issue. We asked the question yesterday of Jesse Keel. He's all in. I mean, you could almost see him slathering to just all in on that. There was some interesting conundrums there as well. We could probably get into that later. But Brad, let's talk about permanent fund reform.
Well, this is the issue we talked about last week. We talked about it the week before, and sort of like K through 12, right? It's going to continue popping up because there are some who are hell bent on making permanent fund reforms to the permanent fund, and I certainly believe that we need some reforms to the permanent fund, particularly the permanent fund board. We've talked a lot on the show previously, on previous episodes, previous segments, about the problems, the concerns I have with the way the board is acting and the results under the board. Now we've got on the board a bunch of personalities, some of whom are running for governor, some of whom want to make their reputation by demonstrating that they're really in control, and they're causing the permanent fund to sort of spin out of control. And not perform in the way that it did under prior board members who wore gray suits and white shirts and just kept their focus on producing solid returns. So I'm a big believer that we need reforms to the permanent fund board in terms of restructuring it to require those appointed to the board to have, as they do in Texas, as the Texas statutes require, have substantial expertise and knowledge and business and background, in the investment industry, a criteria that many of our current board members don't satisfy, and making that an explicit requirement to being appointed to the permanent fund board, and then to increase the vetting on these members and to focus on to make sure that they meet that criteria, require that the permanent fund board appointees by the governor be subject to legislative confirmation, so that we can have a public vetting of those members, and not just have the governor slide in, as appears to be somewhat the case, have the governor slide in political supporters and politicos that want to serve on the permanent fund board to up their profile, to require that legislative confirmation to make sure that they meet the criteria of substantial knowledge and expertise in the investment industry. So I think there's a compelling case, an important case, for having reform to the permanent fund board and the membership and the structure of the permanent fund board. What I don't believe is that we need reform or restructuring to how the permanent fund operates, particularly with respect to the two fund aspect of the permanent fund that we currently have, the corpus,
the protections, right? The protections of the corpus versus the earnings reserve,
right? And those issues are sort of getting conflated. The reform necessary to the permanent fund board is sort of getting conflated with the reform some talk about to the permanent fund corporation. Cliff Grow had an op-ed piece in the ADN this past week that said we need reform to the permanent fund. We need reform to the permanent fund, and sort of went through reforms both to the permanent fund board and into this proposal to merge the two accounts together. And I think it's important to keep those two issues separate. The reforms that we need to the permanent fund board separate from the reforms some are advocating reform. Some are advocating to the accounting system or the structure of the permanent fund corporation. I was intrigued by Jesse Keel's defense yesterday. Senator Jesse Keel is one of those who advocates restructuring the permanent fund corporation to eliminate the two fund account and merge them into a single account. I was intrigued by Jesse's argument yesterday that there are reasons why we need to merge the two accounts together, and the protection that we will have is we will set a cap on what can be taken from the permanent fund corporation, from the corpus at any point in time, as part of these reforms, and that's the protection. So we get the benefits, in his view, we get the benefits of merging the two accounts together, what he thinks are the benefits, and then we get the protection of the cap. Well, we've got a cap now. The cap is in the form of the permanent fund earnings. You can't take more from the permanent fund than is in the earnings reserve account, and that acts as a cap on what you can take from the permanent fund as a whole. So it's not like we don't have a cap now. We have a cap, and the problem with the cap they want to use, the problem with the cap that those who want to merge the two accounts want to use, is the draw rate. They say, oh, well, we'll just have a 5% draw rate, or we'll have some percent draw rate. That'll be our cap, and we can't take more than that. Well, this state has experience with caps. I mean, we have a spending cap in the Constitution that is just way the hell out there. Would allow earnings, or would allow spending even more than we've got currently. Caps that may seem fine at a moment don't necessarily remain fine, don't necessarily remain useful caps over the long term. The cap Cliff talked about in his piece, the cap I think that Jesse talked about yesterday, is a 5% cap. Well, what if returns, as they have been the last several years, what if returns that the permanent fund generates are less than 5%, 4%, 3%? What if the financial world restructures itself in a way that 3% becomes the new normal, or 3.5% becomes the new normal, or 4%? If we've got a cap set at 5%, all that we're doing is eating into the corpus. The difference between what the permanent fund earns and what the cap would be, if we spent up to the cap, we would be taking money out of the corpus. That's the principal result of merging the two accounts together. And so this cap they talk about as being a protection may very well not turn out to be a protection. The reason they're talking about it now is because the permanent fund hasn't earned 5% over the last several years, plus the $8 billion drain that the legislature did out of the earnings reserve. Combined, those two are making the earnings reserve look a lot skinnier than it used to when that $8 billion was still in it. So they're talking about a cap that even now wouldn't protect raids against the corpus. It would allow, it would limit the raid against the corpus, maybe, if it was a hard 5% cap, but it still wouldn't protect the corpus. So I don't see a need to change the cap, to change the structure that we've got now. It's a pretty good structure. The reason that we've got a problem with the earnings reserve right now is because of the $8 billion that got taken out of it to push over in the corpus. We don't have a problem if we use that $8 billion as it was intended, as a prepayment for permanent fund inflation proofing. So I think we're fine where we are.
And I think the part of the problem here is that this is a little bit of a smoke and mirrors red herring, because understanding that because he talked about a constitutional cap on the draw amount. And the problem that most people don't understand is that any constitutional amendment requires a separate bill and a separate vote. So by separating the two things out, the combining of the two funds and the cap, there's always a potential that the cap portion of it doesn't pass muster either with the legislature, because you have to have a supermajority to get it onto the ballot as a constitutional amendment, or the people don't vote it in, which I think is less likely, but I think it's more likely it wouldn't make it past the floor. But they could have both pieces together and say, oh, well, we need this, and then just get access to the corpus and not have it. And ironically, not 10 minutes before the question that I asked him yesterday about this, he said he doesn't believe in spending caps because you shouldn't encumber one over to the other, but then he's supporting a spending cap in the form of a draw a cap on the other side. So it's a little bit disingenuous in that regard.
Yeah, and I might listen to those arguments more if we didn't already have a cap. I mean, what the earnings, set aside the $8 billion that they drained out of the earnings reserve, as arguably or allegedly as prepayments for permanent fund inflation proofing. Set aside that. What the earnings reserve does is really capture what the permanent fund is earning at any given point in time, the actual returns that the permanent fund is earning at any given point in time. So it operates as a cap that, not perfectly, but better than just this artificial number we would pick out of the air, acts as a cap to cap the draws from the permanent fund to the amount of the earnings that the permanent fund is generating. And I think that's a much better cap, a cap that tracks the actual earnings from the permanent fund, as opposed to an artificial cap with the number plucked out of the air. I think that's a much better cap going forward than the alternative that those who want to merge the accounts together argue for. So we need to distinguish when people say, yeah, we need to change the permanent fund. There's two issues in there. One, do we need to change the permanent fund board?
Right.
And I think the answer to that's a strong yes.
Right.
And second is, do we need to change the structure of the permanent fund? I think the answer to that's a strong no.
Right. I agree. Kyle Johansson says some in the legislature will try and combine the account merge bill and the board restructuring bill. These must stay separate and pass or fail on their own merit. And I agree, because it's definitely a yes on one and no on the other. And they have to be a separate vote, because while they focus on the same issue, they are completely different critters as far as that goes. quick final thought, Brad. We're done.
Well, and I'm just saying that's my problem with Cliff Grove's op-ed. Cliff does combine those two. He sort of treats them the same. That we need to reform the permanent fund, and these are the issues we need to address. There are separate issues in there, and we need to keep them in our minds separate because I think they have separate answers.
Yeah, I would agree. All right. Final thoughts here. Oil, gas, and misinformation. Brad's got some thoughts on this coming up in the next segment. This is the fastest 2 hours in radio every Tuesday right here with Brad Keithley. Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Truth Tuesday. We won't talk about the welts or the blisters or the lash marks or anything else. Sometimes the truth hurts, baby. We got to do it. Brad Keithley returns right after this. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Not to mention, of course, all the shell gaming gimmickry that they did to show how low the earnings reserve account is. I mean, it's just, it's astonishing to look at. This is the same thing. I remember Walker doing the same thing on the permanent fund, oh, look at how much little money there is in here and blah, blah, blah. And of course, never counting the income that was going to be coming into the account, only what was there and the draws that were happening. It was the draws for the next 2 years, but no deposits for the next 2 years. And it was doom and gloom, which again was his justification for cutting the PFD all over again. It's oh man, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Brad?
Well, no, we do have... And that's part of the problem with the permanent fund board. I mean, the permanent fund board is an advocate for this for combining the two accounts, and in support of that advocacy of combining the two accounts, they are doing the accounting system for the earnings reserve in a way that shows it in its worst possible light. I mean, the legislature, the $8 billion that got pulled out of the permanent fund earnings reserve by the legislature and put into the permanent fund corpus, the first $4 billion was explicitly for inflation proofing. The legislative language, the legislative intent language that accompanied that was explicit for inflation proofing. It comes over to the permanent fund, and the permanent fund immediately recognizes it as in the first accounting that it did after that money came over. They recognized it as there for inflation proofing. They dropped a footnote. They took out projected inflation proofing for the requisite number of years, and said, yes, that accounts for inflation proofing. Well, after about a year and a half, all of a sudden that disappears. It was like the same treatment that got that the dividend got treated with by Ledge Finance. They recognize it as DGF. They recognize the dividend as designated general funds. And then in 2017, all of a sudden they started saying it was undesignated or unrestricted general funds. And so it was, you could spend it on anything. It's the same sort of sleight of hand. And it was the permanent fund board, the permanent fund corporation, that dropped that footnote, changed the accounting treatment of the first $4 billion. Second $4 billion comes in also for inflation proofing, because the first $4 billion, the governor the legislature had appropriated like $9.5 billion. The governor had line itemed it down to $4 billion. So the legislature went back and refilled what it originally intended, put another $4 billion toward that purpose. That comes in, and the permanent fund corporation doesn't ever treat it as prepaid. It's just their money. Thank you very much. It's not prepaid. Right. It's not prepayment or anything. So the permanent fund board has been part of these games, these accounting games that have created this so-called emergency in the earnings reserve. And they have a bias in it because they're advocating the merger of the two accounts together. We need to go back. I mean, one of the things I like about Agnes Moran, to tell you the honest truth, in House District 1, she's the sister of Bill Moran, who was a chairman of the Permanent Fund Corporation board at one point, and is the guy that I have in vision when I talk about gray suits and white shirts. Bill Moran was the president of First Bank down in Ketchikan, and sort of the typical gray suit, white shirt guy, very staid, very conservative, great banker, very focused on returns on investment. That's who we need to go back to.
Right.
And that's the kind of permanent fund board structure that we need to have, and stop all this games playing that's going on at the permanent fund board level.
David asked, we got about 90 seconds here. David asked, Mike, ask the Brad about the other category of funds. I guess the category that is other. I'm not sure what David's asking there. Maybe are you?
Well, when you look at the, maybe he's talking about the budget. When you look at the annual budget, the operating budget, you've got unrestricted general funds, you got designated general funds, you've got other, and then you've got federal funds. And yes, there is a category of other in there, and the permanent fund dividend got moved into that category from time to time in the past. It's a category of funds. It's not very big.
Right. Well, I mean, that was probably during the shall transfer days when it was just a simple transfer, and it was not really counted one way or the other, which again, curses to Walker and company and parts of the permanent fund for changing how they accounted for it. That opened up the floodgates for what we have today. And unfortunately, it's now become the political football that it is right now. All right, Brad.
And we've got the people who are supposed to be the referees, the permanent fund board, playing in the game on one side.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what's that game? It's almost like a racquetball, right? You just keep bouncing the ball back to yourself more than anything else. You're playing a solo game of racquetball. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. We're 10, 12 seconds out right now. We're going to rejoin the radio. If you haven't gone over to Rumble yet, why don't you do that? And follow on Rumble. I think there's 18 people following me there so far. We need to up that up. Here we go.
Brad Keithley joins us every week to discuss oil, gas, and the economic forecast of Alaska. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Brad Keithley comes in, Truth Tuesdays. We get a little bit of the hard truth, and sometimes it's pleasant, and sometimes it's not so much pleasant, but it's always important. Brad, we're on to number 3, oil and gas and misinformation. That word gets thrown around a lot. So what do you mean exactly? What are you talking about?
I've noticed letters to the editor popping up in several of the state's newspapers from Joe Sherhorn, who used to head Northrum Bank, maybe still does head Northrum Bank, and Jim Jansen, two of the top 5%, top 1% in the state, who often argue in favor of permanent fund dividend cuts as a way of balancing the budget. Aren't big on talking about spending cuts, but they're big on talking about permanent fund dividend cuts as a way of funding that spending. They're also big defenders of the oil industry. And these letters to the editor that are popping up are interesting. Here's what it says. There's a resurgence in oil production and jobs in Alaska that is directly related to our current oil tax policy. SB 21, a fair and competitive tax policy, replaced the antiquated ACES tax structure that drove down petroleum investment for more than a decade. ACES wasn't in effect for a decade. So you sort of wonder about that. But thanks to SB 21, Alaskans have the greatest opportunity of our generation on the North Slope today. Some present and former legislators argue that SB 21 was a mistake, but the facts speak for themselves. So what these letters are anticipating, and there'll be an op-ed that will come from them at some point because it has in the past. What these letters are anticipating is as we get into the fall, as we get into the legislative races, as people get pressed on how you're going to pay for the spending that you're advocating, that a number of legislators, candidates, and a number of legislators will weigh in and talk about oil tax reform as being part of the package to pay for the deficits that we're generating. And these guys are trying to get out in front and saying, don't change SB 21. What the next paragraph would say if they wrote it is use permanent fund dividend cuts instead. Don't change SB 21. Here's my problem with this letter. It's misleading in this sense. It's saying that SB 21 has led to new investment, has led to jobs, has led to production growth. What they leave out is its impact on state revenues. And as we've talked about on previous segments of the show, what's going on with SB 21, the longer it stays in effect as it was originally passed. Looking forward, what SB 21 is doing is growing production volumes. I have no argument with that. It's growing the jobs related to those production volumes, but state revenues from that increased production is staying flat. The state is not getting the benefit in terms of additional revenues from those additional volumes. And it's the way in which SB 21 is operating in sort of the environment that we've moved into 10 years after its passage. They want to keep it the same because they want to see that continued production increase and job growth related to the oil industry. But that's not the only way we ought to be evaluating whether SB 21 is working. We ought to be looking at it critically in terms of what's its impact on state revenues. Are state revenues growing with that increase in production? Are Alaskans getting the benefit of that additional, are Alaskans overall getting the benefit of that increased production from in terms of increased state revenues? And the answer, when you look at the Department of Revenue spring revenue forecast, when you look at the revenue forecast before that, the fall 2023 revenue forecast, the answer is no. The answer, in fact, is even though we're having a growth in production volumes, the two segments of oil taxes, the two pieces of the oil tax universe that applies most to production, royalty and production tax, are going down over that period of time. Over the next 10 years, are going over the outlook period in the state revenue forecast are going down over that period. The only reason that we're staying flat, the state revenues are staying flat, is because of the growth in the petroleum corporate income tax. That's offsetting the decline in revenues coming from production taxes and from royalties. So it's what they're doing. I mean, as any advocate would, I suppose, they're focusing on the positives, that there is oil production growth, that we do have a growth in jobs in the segment of the Alaska universe that's focused on oil industry jobs, although a lot of those are coming from non-residents who are flying in to take those jobs. But we have growth in those segments, but we're not getting the benefit to the state in terms of revenue growth that's commensurate with the production growth. So they're telling half a tale, and they're not giving the full picture. They're trying to convince Alaskans that SB 21 is working for Alaskans, all Alaskans, because of the production growth and the jobs, but they're not telling Alaskans, as they should, that Alaskans are not getting the benefit of any revenue growth out of that increased production. And that's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to see in terms of this debate as it goes on. It's going to be selective. Let me use selective numbers here. Let me use the production growth and the jobs recovery. Let me use those numbers and let's forget about this revenue side. But the revenue side, I mean, what's most important to Alaskans out of the oil industry? It's the revenues. It's the state revenues, right? That's where Alaskans benefit from the oil industry. That's
right.
Where Alaskans benefit.
Well, that's where our constitutional mandate is, right? Maximum benefit of the state and the citizens. That's what it's supposed to be. I mean, you've advocated for it. You've said, look, we're not getting our fair share. SB 21 was better than the other in the short run, but in the long run, we're finding out that it's not giving us, again, increased production, flat or lower revenues. We need to start looking at that and realize we have a finite resource and we should be getting what, our fair share is out of a finite resource and stop essentially letting that money slip off the table. And you've estimated what, $400 or $500 million potentially on the table every year that we're letting go away that could, again, offset PFD cuts or others.
It's not even my estimate. It's Department of Revenue ran estimates back when Dunleavy was focused on fixing the budget crisis, other than through PFD cuts. Department of Revenue ran a number of alternatives of alternative revenue sources. One of those was looking at changes to the oil taxes, and that $400 comes from the Dunleavy, from the Department of Revenue estimates of what you could generate out of changing the oil tax in a way that wouldn't damage the competitiveness of Alaska for investment dollars, and would derive additional revenue for the state. So you got $400 there, $400 million there, and you got another $100 million from the Hillcorp loophole in the petroleum corporate income tax. I mean, we would have, even with the decline in revenues coming from the production tax and from royalties over the next 10 years, we would have an increase if Hillcorp, a small increase, but we'd have an increase if Hillcorp paid petroleum corporate income taxes, but they don't because of this loophole they've taken advantage of. And so it's $400 million plus or minus Department of Revenue estimate from changes that would not change the competitive structure, but changes in the way SB 21 operates, plus the $500 million when you add in the $100 million from closing the Hillcorp loophole.
Final thoughts today, Brad, as we wrap things up for this morning. Your final thoughts.
So I think the primary has indicated that we've got a path forward on a realistic fiscal plan. People who are advocates of realistic fiscal plans, but all of them are in tight races. Most of them are in tight races, I guess. And we're going to need to be supportive of the candidates who are focused on fiscal issues, focused on advocating the right position on fiscal issues. We're going to need to be supportive of them to get them over the line. That's going to be sort of the fall push as we head toward the general election.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. I'll have some thoughts on this in the other side. We'll be talking to Brad here at the top of the hour with some final thoughts maybe on yesterday's conversation with Jesse and more. You could find him at ak4sb.com or just go argue with him over on Twitter. He loves that. He just lives for the Twitter fights, the X fights out there now, I guess. X battles, whatever they're calling them these days. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board and joining us. We appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that does it for us today. We've got more coming up next hour. So I don't know if you got a chance to I'm sorry, when I get kicked off of I can't talk and type at the same time. It's my one failing. Well, I'm sure it's one of my many failings, but I don't know if you got a chance to watch the whole interview. It was definitely an interesting interview yesterday with Jesse Keel. And he really let the fur fly as far as all the things that he wants, and he wants it all, man. Combining the permanent fund, doesn't think we're going to get much in the way of fiscal policy. He's okay with the 25-75. He wants to find benefits, more education spend. I mean, it was a little bit of give me it all. Give me it all at this point.
I think it was a great interview, Michael. I think he did a good job, getting his positions out there and raising the questions that need to be raised, and in the process of doing that, highlighting the internal inconsistencies in the argument. One of those on the defined benefits I found interesting was the talk about turnover rate. Turnover rate's the key variable, or one of the key variables. One of the important key variables in the defined benefits argument. If you assume that the turnover rate is high under the current plan and low under the defined contribution plan and low under the defined benefits plan, you get a bunch of savings from training and from bringing on new people that you have if the turnover rate is high. So if you say that we've got a high turnover rate under the defined contribution plan, and we'll have a low turnover under the defined benefit plan, then you get a big boost out of that. In your argument, you get a lot of dollars out of that. But his argument sort of was, yes, we have a very high rate under the defined contribution plan, and that's one of the reasons we need a defined benefit plan. But if you assume the defined benefit plan cures the turnover rate, then the defined benefit plan becomes more expensive, and much more expensive, because you're paying in all these defined benefit. You're paying the state's paying in all these advanced payments for defined benefits, because you're assuming everybody's going to max out on defined benefits. And so he walked this very narrow tightrope of saying, yes, the turnover rate under defined contribution is high. The turnover rate under defined benefits will be lower, but it won't be so low as to make the defined benefit plan more expensive. So it was a very narrow tightrope with respect to that issue on defined benefits. That's an issue we need to focus on, the turnover rate, and get an answer on the turnover rate. And there's not a good answer to that, because we haven't done a whole lot of exit interviews, as came out during your interview.
My shock. The state doesn't do exit interviews. What? People are voluntarily leaving. Wouldn't you like to know why they're leaving? Wouldn't you like to have an idea systemically with 20,000 employees why somebody's leaving? You don't ask? No, but the union does. I'm sure that'll be nonpartisan. And, I'm like, what?
Yeah, there was another piece of that I found interesting. I mean, so one of the arguments for going to defined benefits is defined contributions are costing the contributors more and paying them less. During my work career, I lived under both defined benefits and defined contribution plans. And I found that defined contribution plans were better. The reason they were better is because I could pick the investments I wanted to make out of the contribution, my contribution and the matching contribution, that I could pick the investment I wanted to make out of that. And the people I worked for, the law firms I worked for, and the contribution plans they had set up, produced some pretty healthy returns, better than are being produced, better than were produced by the defined benefit plans that I had for a portion of my career. So I and others, I know others, benefited from having defined contributions. As Jesse was describing, and as I recall this discussion during the defined benefit plan, I mean, a lot of it is hinging on the fact that we have essentially trash defined contribution alternatives or plans for people who are making defined contributions. And part of the answer may be in looking at what plans we're offering for the defined contribution people, and seeing if we can't improve those plans. If we're just giving them the opportunity of plans that have high front end costs or have high management fees and have low returns, then yeah, I can see why you're upset with that. But if they have the opportunity of plans that have fairly moderate management, as I had the advantage of, fairly moderate management fees and fairly high returns if you play them right, then I think that defined contribution is better. And the state may not be offering the type of variety of defined contribution plans that enable you to put that together.
Well, that was one of the recommendations from Reason, was that we look at the defined contributions and improve that, because they did say there could be improvements on that to make it more competitive with other areas, but they don't want to hear it. What they want to hear is they want to hear a return to defined benefits, because that's what the unions want. And that's the direction that they want to push it. Unfortunately, can we afford it, and who pays? That's the biggest question there. And there's really no answer to that other than the permanent fund and the people of the state of Alaska. That's it. All right.
There was one last thing that I'll do quickly. Jesse said also that we have that people who are in this new defined benefit plan will have skin in the game. If it blows up, they'll pay part of the costs. We've had a pension plan blow up before, and what happened then was the state rushed in and said, "Oh, we'll take care of it." We'll take care of those costs. So I don't have any faith that if it blows
and all
up,
the municipalities and everything else.
Yeah.
All right, Brad, we got to go. Thank you so much for coming on board. Love having you on. Thanks for being part of it today. Folks, we're out of time. The Michael Duke Show.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. That's your FM translator for those of you who are wondering. Welcome back to the program. It is hour 2 of the big radio broadcast, and it is the Tuesday edition. So we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and had the weekly top 3 where we got a chance to talk about a lot of the issues that are facing us right now. And of course, it's hard, it's painful, it's frustrating, it's difficult to watch. It's, sometimes the truth hurts, baby. And that's where we're at right now. We're feeling that truth hurt, and it is not a fun time being had by all. Let me just put it that way. It's not a fun time to watch what's going on with that, and it is very, very frustrating to see. But what are we gonna do? How are we gonna make that happen? We were just talking with Brad here at the end of this last segment about defined benefits and Jesse Keel's commentary on defined benefits and everything else that was going on. It's frustrating to watch, man. It's frustrating to watch this discussion on defined benefits and realize that this is definitely where we are potentially putting the rubber to the road for the destruction of the state. We've already seen it. Now they assure us that there are guide rails. Oh, well, we've learned from our lesson, and don't worry, it won't happen again. We won't let that happen again, right? I mean, that's right. Am I right? I mean, that's what they're saying. That we couldn't possibly, that would not happen again. We've seen this coming and it won't be, But again, no real fiscal note with it. No real idea of how much it's going to cost. No real idea of nothing. Nothing. It's a problem. Let's just put it that way. It is a problem for us in the state of Alaska because, and of course, the other thing is that they, when they're talking about this with defined benefits specifically, they are saying, well, we want to, we're just going to offer this to first responders, right? That's the camel's nose under the tent. That's just the beginning. Because if you offered a defined benefits program to the first responders, the next thing you know, all the other employee units, all the other union groups would be like, well, if they've got it, then we want it, right? If they get it in a sense of fairness and equity, then we should get it too. And I'm sure it would be the teachers who would fall into the bucket next. And then it would be other state employees, including university employees and everything else. And then potentially, like it was before, where you had all of the municipalities and state and local governments falling under the same umbrella, and they were able to participate in the PERS and TERS system. By the way, that's why all these municipalities right now are still on the hook. That's why they're still paying a tremendous amount of money into the previous defined benefits programs, because their employees, many of whom are now retired, are still were part of that. So it wouldn't just be the first responders. It would be first responders, then teachers, then other employees, university employees, municipal employees, borough employees, and all of a sudden everybody would be back on the bandwagon again. But don't worry, it'll be fine. Don't worry. It will just you don't worry your pretty little head about it. It will just be fine. To those of us who are watching this, we're like, that's good. That's good. But what if I don't believe it? What if I just don't believe it? But don't worry. The whole point, and the biggest thing for me, especially with the new workforce, and that's part of this whole thing, right, is they are saying if we had a defined benefits program, then we should, and I agree with what Donna just said. Donna said, if municipalities want defined benefits, then they should pay for them. I agree with that. They should not be glommed together, because then the state can rise and fall in its own deal and they won't get caught up in it, which is what's happened now. But the whole idea is, if you're looking to utilize defined benefits as a way to attract new employees, which is part of their argument, right? We can't get new employees because we're not competitive. We just, they want to go. And of course, they're not looking at the philosophical change that is the reality of today's workforce, right? The reality of today's workforce is that nobody is expecting to work at the same place for 30 years and gather a pension. That's not even a thing. Wall Street Journal had an interesting article out yesterday, day before, that I was looking at, and it was supremely interesting, because it says, as Generation X approaches retirement, that reality still bites, that the forgotten generation born between 1965 and 19 launched their careers at the start of a massive shift in how Americans work. Companies moved from pensions that promise steady income after years of service to plans such as 401ks that place employees' retirement destiny in their own hands. But a lot of Gen Xers were in that hole between the two. Now, I remember when I was young and I was just got out of high school, I was going to college, and my dad was like, oh, you need to get this thing, golden parachute. You should, go to work for some place that's got a pension and get that. And the problem is that most of the places that I was working, that was not really even an offer. They didn't have a pension. And many of them didn't have pensions anymore. And many of them didn't have a 401k style. There was literally this area in there where there was neither one was really a choice. I found it interesting to say that the Gen X generation, one of the stats that they had in here was that the median balance between Gen Xers between 45 and 54 years old had a median account balance of roughly $60,000 in their retirement plans, according to the firm Vanguard in 2023. The Gen Xers between 45 and 54, the median account balance, the average account balance was $60,000 in their 10 years from retirement. So this is obviously part of the problem. But what I'm saying is that it's not taking into account the way things are changing. Because, for example, today's Gen, they're not millennials now, they're what, Gen Z? I can never remember, because the millennials came after. Anyway, Gen Z, I think, is the latest one. But millennials and Gen Z, neither one of them have ever anticipated having a pension plan, a full-on retirement. And in fact, most of them expect to change jobs, if not overall vocations. I think they said 12 jobs was the average for changing jobs, and that the vocation could change as many as 4 times. Like your industry, like I could change out of being in radio to something else. And that's something that they're not even taking into account here. Now, with defined benefits, remember, one of the things that it does is that it locks these employees in. They can't go anywhere. It's not a portable system. They could work in the state, they could work in the state government, they may be to have some kind of lateral transfer inside the state. But if they want to see it, they can't pull out and go over to they can't pull out and go over to some other occupation and take their stuff with them. It's just not a thing. So there are there's some pluses, but there's also some big minuses to this as well. And I think we need to look at, on top of this, we need to be looking at what is the fundamental shift in philosophy for the new breed or new demographic of worker. But see, the answer at this point, most politicians' answers to everything is, we just need more money. We just need more money. That's what it is. It's just more. And that's problematic. And like Brad said, Jesse walking the line of too much versus not enough, too many people turning over, or too few people turning over will increase the cost of their of the defined benefits program, and really no idea of what it's going to cost. And see, that to me is the biggest problem. And I said it yesterday and I'll say it again today. The problem is that you're taking at best a guess as to what something is going to cost 20 years to 30 years in the future. It's just a rough guess. That's all it is. You're hoping you have enough money put away to pay for that when the employee reaches that retirement age. Whereas with a defined contribution plan, 401k, IRA, some kind of portable plan, you know exactly how much money is going in every year, and then it puts the responsibility back on the employee to make sure that they are saving enough to do that specifically. But it's a fixed cost for you on your side. It's very predictable. The military has got in it. One of the most recent examples of the implosion of a defined benefit plan was yellow trucking. Remember yellow trucking? Was that last year when it exploded? Delta Airlines had to be bailed out of their defined benefits program by the federal government. GM had to be bailed out. There are municipalities that are dropping out of it. Now, he said yesterday, Jesse Keel said, no, they were going back to it. I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to call somebody up from Reason and have them come on the program because, again, I know enough to be dangerous, but I need somebody who's a little bit more detailed on this and can give us some stats. But there are people at Reason who've dedicated their whole career to making sure that these pension plans, be they defined contribution or defined benefits plans, don't bankrupt the states. And they're working, they're working with it. Chris says, face it, you have to work until your last breath. I mean, really, I'm in that group of Gen Xers that they're talking about right there. I expect that I will be working until I drop dead. That's just how it is. Because, again, I was in that window of we really didn't have 401ks. They weren't really super available to the masses in an independent form at that time. And pensions had gone away. Defined benefit pensions had gone away. And that whole paradigm was shifting as I was getting into the workforce. Not for everybody. There were some, depending on the industry and stuff, but the industries that I was looking at, it just didn't have it. And as a result, I didn't take advantage of the things that I may have been able to if I'd been a little more savvy at that point. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that's just the way it was. So it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to see as we watch it. All right, we got to go. We're walking up into it here. Hour 2 continues. Chris Story will be joining us at the end of this show, the end of the hour today for the final segment, and we'll be back with more. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay. Let me go back here to see what some of you guys are saying. Donna said, if you want defined benefits, they should pay for them, talking about the municipalities. Willie says, the teachers union out here is the only group out here screaming for defined benefits. The city is quiet and the troopers are silent. AK Freedom over on Rumble said, speaking of universities, why have we taken the pressure off downsizing and consolidation? We just haven't talked much about it. I don't know if we've taken the pressure off, but it's definitely still high on my priority list. David says, even the U.S. military no longer has a defined benefits program. It's a blended retirement. Yeah. No pensions, MD selling auto parts. No pensions. No pensions in that regard. No pensions there, and no pensions in radio. I mean, I've worked in the automotive industry for a few years, and I worked in radio for the rest of my life, pretty much. I've only changed career paths really once. And in fact, I changed back I went from one to the other. But yeah, no pensions. Another issue with retention of at least with the FPD is the non-opt-out healthcare cost. I retired from the military and had TRICARE and VA coverage, yet FPD won't let you out of their expensive health plan, said Timothy. Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. If you already have coverage, why would you be forced, both you and the employer, to have to contribute both your shares in that? It makes no sense. Brian says, what's the round thing in front of the microphone? This thing right here? Yeah. That's, Frank says it's a swear filter. He says it's a swear filter, but I don't think so. No. It's what they call a pop filter. It prevents me from popping my P's and plosives, and so it's not. A lot of times you'll see them and they'll be like these round foam muffs, but I hate those because I spit when I talk and they get nasty. This one's made from metal. It's very similar to something like this. Well, you can't see it because I got the thing in the way there and it's hooked to the wall. It's very similar to something like this, only a lot smaller. Right? They put those in front of microphones to keep the pops down. They call it a plosive filter or pop filter. So there you go. There's your behind the radio voice scenes. But anyway, it's there for a reason. All right. They want my money and my parents' money that they invested for me. They'll want my money and I'm not sure what Amy's saying there, but yeah. Amy says she's in that group too. I'll be working until I'm dead. Yeah. Do I have any, Michael, do you have any federal Social Security coming to you when you get to the retirement age? Well, technically, I suppose I do, but the projections are that the Social Security will run out of money the year before I'm eligible. That they will be diminishing benefits by 20 to 25% the year before I'm eligible, and it will just go down from there. So there you go. Frank says, and yet Steve Thompson was in favor of defined benefits? Yeah. Well, I guess it's different when you're a private business owner and you have to pay for that versus the state. That's what it is. Brian says his ADD is strong. That's why he had to ask this morning. Harold says, get used to a $500 PFD being called meaningful. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it right there. That is 100% exactly it. All right. Well, we're returning to the radio here in just a second. Again, I think we went up 1 follower, 17 followers now on Rumble. Why won't you go over to Rumble and say you love me? That's all I want. I just want to be loved. Go over there in case I get kicked off of Facebook. That's really why I'm on Rumble. In case I get kicked off of Facebook, at least I'll have another option. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Yup. Yarp. Welcome back. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. A lot of people in the chat room are kind of in my shoes. The same thing. A lot of people saying, yep. I'm sorry, I was just looking at the over on Rumble. One of our listeners, Alaskans, said, yep, working till 12 o'clock the day of my funeral. That's how it feels sometimes, right? I mean, it's like I got a plan, but I'm just not sure it's going to work out quite the way I thought. Yep, going to be working till 12 noon the day of my own funeral. And then Randy asked whether or not I was going to get Social Security. Well, yeah, except for the whole thing is supposed to start running out of money the year before I'm eligible. Literally, the year before I'm eligible is the current target, and it's been coming backwards. It was a year after I was eligible, or 2 years, and it's been moving forward and forward. By the time I get there, I feel like I'll be lucky if I get 50% of what I put into Social Security. I mean, I feel like I will be lucky if I get to that point. Just kind of the way it is. But we'll see what happens. All right, well, let's move over to some of the big headlines, and there have been some really good headlines. And I mean, like, good news. Of course, the biggest news that we talked about a little bit yesterday before we had to jump into that interview with Jesse Keel was the fact that on Friday, Nancy Dahlstrom withdrew from the race for Congress. And again, big props to her. Big props to her for reading the room. Although it would have been hard not to read the room. I don't know about you, but I was following her. She had made a post to Facebook that said she was in it to win it, and she's here to defeat Nancy, and the only way she can do it is to say thing. And at last look, it had something like 180 comments, and 170 of them were Nancy, read the room, get out of the race. So I think she could see the handwriting on the wall. And I think she also was losing support from the big money machine in D.C. at the same time, because they could see that this was going to be a non-starter. So she withdrew from the race, and good for her. Again, kudos to her, and I appreciate her. I want to say that. Nick Begich, in the meanwhile, picked up more endorsements, including House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, who's from Minnesota, Republican Conference Chairwoman Elise Stefanik, House Speaker Mike Johnson. Of course, Mike Lee had already endorsed him. Scott Perry from Pennsylvania. And then House Majority Leader Steve Scalise also endorsed him. And of course, he then picked up the endorsement of the Alaska Republican Party. Chairwoman Carmela Warfield on Friday went out and thanked Dahlstrom for her dedication and for her courage to step aside and to move on. She went on to say, as we move forward, I encourage all Alaska Republicans and all Alaskans to unite and support Nick to take back our lone congressional seat and defeat Mary Peltola. Nick is dedicated to Alaska and will be a champion for us in Congress, always putting Alaska first. Now is the time to come together as a united party to support Donald Trump. Senator J.D. Vance, Nick Begich, and other candidates in their races for State House and State Senate. She also gave a nod to Mike Dunleavy, who she said works tirelessly for Alaska. Now's the time for us to do our part, grow our majorities, and come together. Which, again, I'm hoping to have a conversation with Carmela Warfield here sometime in the near future. Because I would like to talk about the part that the Republican Party in the state of Alaska needs to play in fixing what's wrong with the party. And of course, when Nancy Dahlstrom dropped out, it caused the Peltola team to try and scramble to come up with a new strategy, because before she was just like playing the middle and doing whatever. I mean, she was kind of going to be coasting in that regard. And so it's kind of good to see. In other news, for Senate seat H, Matt Clayman was being faced by both Tom McKay and Liz Vasquez. And Clayman was way ahead. He got 60% of the vote, and they split 40% between the two of them. This is going to be a very difficult race. But it has now been made easier because Tom McKay dropped out of the race and left it for just Liz Vasquez to take on. I think we're seeing more and more of this, which is good. You know, again, talking about Cole Snodgrass dropping out of the race for 36, Mike Cronk's old district, leaving Rebecca Schwanke as the in there. There's still several other candidates, but Cole at least had committed that if he didn't come in number one, he would drop out, and he did almost immediately, which again is a crying shame, because I really would have liked to see him and some of his ideas down in Juneau. There was a common sense guy that could have given Ben Carpenter a run for his money as far as fiscal plans and understanding how that stuff works. It is great stuff. The dropout deadline is September the 2nd, by the way. Somebody in the chat room was just asking, when is the dropout deadline? September 2nd is the date to withdraw. So we may see some more withdrawals before the end of the thing. But Tom McKay's out. Brad just mentioned, and I hadn't seen it yet, but Nick Moe apparently dropped out as well. So we'll be watching that. Let me pull up the candidates update, see if I can see if anybody else has dropped out really quickly here. I mean, as quickly as the internet will allow me here. The withdrawal date. This is for the primary election. I want for the general election. Is this still right? Okay. Let's see if it nope, still says Nancy Dahlstrom is the thing. I want candidates. State apparently has not updated their registration yet on who is on the ballot. Because according to this right now, I still see Nancy Dahlstrom. She is still up on the thing here. Is that it? Okay. I guess that's it. I can't see the new there we go. State elections, state candidates. No, this was just updated on August the 20th. So this list still has some of the candidates on, but I think you'll probably see a few more candidates drop out. I'm hoping as we go through. In District 36, Rebecca Schwanke is in the lead on the Republican side. Then you had James Fields, the Libertarian, Pam Good, Dana Mock. They're still in there. All the Republicans. James Fields, the Libertarian, but Pamela Good and Dana Mock are Republicans. And then, of course, Brandon Kowalski is the Democrat. So maybe some of the others will drop out of this race, although I would bet money that Pamela will probably not drop out of the race just because based on my knowledge. I don't think it's going to happen, but we'll see how it goes. The repeal of ranked choice voting is going to appear on the ballot. The Supreme Court ruled on Friday. And I am super excited about this. Supporters of the ballot measure to eliminate the open primary and ranked choice voting system are applauding the Supreme Court's ruling late Thursday that will allow it to appear on the ballot. Scott Kendall argued in front of the Alaska Supreme Court. He said the Division of Elections did not comply with the deadlines and act within its authority when it allowed measure sponsors to fix errors with petition booklets. The Department of Elections, though, said that they followed the law. They followed the law. Citing the law in question, Kimberly Rogers, who appeared on behalf of the state, argued that the state statute clearly states that the measure sponsors could make corrections within a specific time frame. Said it allows initiative sponsors to make corrections to circulator certificates during the division's 60-day signature review, and the division correctly applied the statute here, and she went on through it. Now, Kendall, who couldn't win it on the merits of the case, I love this, he tried to convince the Alaska Supreme Court to kill the repeal measure. He said he's worried about the future of Alaska's election. This is like the last-minute, last-ditch gambit, right? Because he couldn't win it on the merits. So he comes back and says, are they willing to give the political party the power to shut out 60% of Alaskan voters from primary elections? Because that's what this ballot measure does. This ballot measure gives the parties the power to exclude any voter not formally registered with their party, which in Alaska is about 63%. Doom and gloom. I'm surprised he didn't say dark money, right? I'm surprised it was like not dark money. I'm surprised he didn't do that. I'm super surprised at this point. But this Hail Mary at the very end, are they willing to give the political parties the power to shut out 60% of Alaska voters for your primary elections? Because that's what this ballot measure does. When he couldn't kill it on the merits, he goes for the Hail Mary and crashes and burns. That's it. He's all done. He's all done. So good for us. Good for us, right? I mean, that's some good stuff right there. All right. Well, we're up against the break. What was the last thing I wanted to touch on? I guess that's it. I guess that's it for right now. That was pretty much most of the kind of the good news on the political front, which seems oxymoronic, but there we go. That's how it is. Chris Story's coming up next. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We're back with more after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. All right. What do we got here? Let me go back to the comments. Tawny said, she said, I tend to use Rumble when I don't have time to participate in the chat. That's fine. I just want to be able to go out there and, I mean, I got 3,000 people that follow me on Facebook. Not that they join the chat, but, there's 28 people watching on Rumble right now, and there's only 17 followers on Rumble. So if you feel like it, hit the follow button. I'm basically saying make sure you follow on Rumble just in case I get kicked off of Facebook, because it is a possibility. I mean, there's just I could say something one day that just offends the powers that be. Cole needs to move to District F. Is Harold backing out? He said no. No, he said no, but now, maybe he had said no before. He says having discussions with any District F candidate willing to exchange ideas. What does that mean? Having discussions with any District F? What does that mean? Are you looking for somebody that you can negotiate an endorsement with, or what does that mean? Bjorkman should withdraw and refile as a Democrat. Okay. Summer dropped and now supports Murkowski and ranked choice voting. Well, yeah, that was kind of weird when I saw that. Cole needs to run for local office to obtain experience and name recognition. I think he'd do fantastic. I really do. I really do. Let's see. Save our democracy. Save our democracy. And you get some weird comments on Rumble, said Brian. Yeah, because it doesn't always aggregate into my chat, I don't see it sometimes, and it takes me a minute to kill it. Sometimes it takes me a minute to go over there and kill the weird comments. John says, John just sent me, Big John, you know who Big John is, if you know who I'm talking about. The Alaska study industry does not support or endorse Nick Begich. We emphatically want to make it clear that there is no room in Alaska politics for someone like Mr. Begich and his fiscal common sense. So it is written, so it is done. The Alaska study industry has spoken. I just love that. I just love that. Thank you, John. Thanks for sounding off today, my brother. Appreciate that. Let me get Story on the line here. Get him all squared away here. See if I can get this thing to work. Hey, hallelujah! Worked in the first round.
Good morning, Mr. Dukes.
Hello, Mr. They call him Mr. Story. What's going on, brother?
How are you? I am cleaning up a cup of coffee I spilled on the floor in my library.
I was say, did you spill it on your console? Because that would be,
Nope, I spilled it right next to my chair where I do my best thinking, Michael. So is this a tragedy? No.
It's
travesty?
No. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. I agree. It's a tragedy. That's what happens. Sometimes you have a tragedy where you spill a cup of coffee. First of all, that's coffee abuse. We're going to talk about that later, young mister.
Right.
But
that's right.
Yeah. But all right. Well, I'll give you a second to finish cleaning up and get settled. Okay. I'll be right back to you.
You bet.
All right. We're going to put him back on hold because nobody needs to hear about his bad coffee, his bad coffee stories. Bad coffee. All right. If it was Folgers, it would be tragic. I use Folgers for ice melt. I mean, what do you want? I mean, I just, Folgers is not really, but David said, RE the voter rolls. I just changed my address with DMV. Then DMV goes to DOE to change my voter registration. Result, I am in a new district with no proof of residing in that district. So could many change their driver's licenses in order to vote in a tight swing district election? Don't you have to show proof of residing in the district when you go to the DMV? I mean, I haven't changed my address in 10 years, so I can't remember. But, and in fact, I think I didn't even bother to change my address until, no, I did, because I wanted to vote in the thing, so I made sure I did it. I don't even know at this point. I think I actually changed my registration with the Department of Elections, Division of Elections, not the DMV. I don't know. I can't even remember now. But, this is the problem with the motor voter thing. That is part of the problem right there, in my humble opinion. Or not so humble opinion. No requirement to show proof. You can change it online. Well, okay. I mean, okay. Is it the Michael Duke show with you looking left or the Michael Duke show with you looking right? Well, one is my personal. The other one is the channel. It's the one with the channel with me looking left. It's with all the spaces in it. That's the one with all the spaces. There you go. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yes, I am. I fully agree. Fully agree. All right, time to dive into this. Chris Story, the man from Homer, who was out there abusing his coffee cup and was busy cleaning it up when I called him. And hopefully he's all cleaned up and settled down there with a new cup of Joe and ready to go. Let's bring him on board. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Fantastic, Michael. On top of the world, even though my coffee was on top of the floor.
Yes,
no problem.
It was.
No
well,
problem.
Better than on top of your broadcasting console.
Absolutely. I have a beautiful King Charles Cavalier Spaniel resting in my lap. All is right with the world.
I will tell you a story. In my 30 plus years of broadcasting, 35 almost years of broadcasting, I have only once made that mistake where I accidentally dropped a cup of coffee. Fortunately, it wasn't on the main broadcast board. It was on on equipment that played audio cuts. And that was a sad, sad day. Let me just put it that way. That was a sad day because, oh man, you'll only do that one time and then you get very, very cautious with where you put your drinks around your studio.
Mm-hmm. Kind of leads right into what I wanted to talk about, which was the business of forgiveness. And you've obviously forgiven yourself from that idiotic rookie maneuver.
I'm just glad my boss forgave me for it. I mean, that was a $4,000 piece of equipment. That was not something they had to send back to get fixed. You know, it's definitely was not a happy day.
Wow, no kidding. Well, so I think the business of forgiveness, starting with yourself, like you just demonstrated there, you must have moved on from it and forgiven yourself, is important. I think it pays profits two ways. I think when you are in the business of forgiveness, you get profits from both how you feel and how you see the world, but also the people around you benefit. So I think you can grow rich with contentment and using forgiveness, and you get the richer you get is because you've been giving it away more. But it does start with yourself. I truly believe that. Mark Twain said that forgiveness is defined by the fragrance that the violet sheds upon the heel that has crushed it. And when you think about that beautiful phrase, think, wow, okay, the fragrance that the violet sheds upon the heel that has crushed it. That is the essence of living. I got a text from a friend.
Wait a second. I'm trying to dissect that. The fragrance of the violence spreads on the heel that crushed it. Is that what you just said?
The violence. So forgiveness is
I was thinking violence. I was like, there's a fragrance of violence? Man,
there is.
I've been doing it.
Don't forget that.
I've been doing it wrong the whole time.
Tim Wall's wife loved the smell of violence, and she kept the windows open so she could smell Minneapolis burn.
That's true. That's true.
This is the running mate of Vice President Harris, whose wife loves the smell of violence. But this is the smell of Violet the flower, and I think it's just emblematic of why number one, why we love Mark Twain. He just put things in such a simple and yet believable and rememberable way, but also. Yeah, if you're holding on to a grudge against somebody else or you're holding yourself, you have a grievance that you filed with yourself many years or months or moons ago, and you haven't let go of it and you haven't come to terms with it, you're only hurting yourself. But no, you're also hurting those around you, because I'll give you an example. A friend of mine went out for a drink the other night, and she texted me, "Do you know this idiot?" And it was a picture of this guy sitting at the bar. I'm like, no, I don't. Well, he was just trashing you, just absolutely trashing you. I don't know who this person is. I have no clue who this person is and or why. What have I done or said or what? Why would they have a grievance against me? We don't even know each other. And then, so instantly, because I'm a human being, even though I wake up on top of the world, Michael, I'm a human being, and I was instantly angry. Like, who does this person think they are? And then almost as quick, and I'm proud to say almost as quick, I went to, I'm in the business of forgiveness. I know what's going on here. And because I was able to put on my glasses of forgiveness and look at the world a little differently, just for that moment, I recognized this person is unhappy. This person's not upset with me. They're upset with themselves or their station in life or something that hasn't worked out. They just are perceiving the world through the lens of this kind of discontent. And like Johnny Appleseed probably goes around spreading it as much and as often as far and wide as he can the seeds of discontent and disharmony and upset. And it's nothing to do with me. It's all to do with his own toxic grievance that he's holding on to. And since I'm in the business of forgiveness, I quickly let it go and enjoyed the rest of my vacation. It was just like, oh, it was this instant moment of just, and I could have stewed on that for the whole week that I was on vacation. I could have stewed on it. And no, I'm in the business of forgiveness. And one of the biggest things I've ever done in my life was to forgive myself for my own mistakes. And that's why I'm saying, if you'll just stop for a minute, analyze what a grievance you might be holding against yourself, and you haven't thought about it in years, but maybe this conversation is prompting you to go, oh yeah, I really do hold something against myself or a family member or somebody who's wronged me sometime before. And like the old adage, I forget what it is, but it's essentially, holding a grudge is like taking the poison yourself. And
right.
It really is a toxic chemical inside your own body. And so get into the business of forgiveness and find something to forgive yourself for today or somebody else, and feel that joy, and it will radiate from you. A real joy, not a manufactured joyful noise like the DNC.
It's the feeling of joy. Look, the thing is, I've never understood holding a grudge. I mean, do I get angry sometimes with people? Do I get frustrated with people? Sure. Are there people that I don't really like? Sure.
Yeah.
But to hold a grudge, I guess I've never really understood that. And of course, there's a whole industry, and I'm thinking about, I walked in one day, my wife she was laughing so hard. I'm like, what are you laughing at? She goes, I'm watching this episode of this show. And it was one of the housewives shows. And I'm like, I watched it for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, these people are talking about things that happened years. Nobody can let go of a grudge. No, she goes, it's just insane. And I'm like, yeah, it is insane. And people, I guess, find it entertaining. But how can you go through life not forgiving people for being people, I guess, is what I've never understood that. I've never understood that, where people just hold the grudge and they hold on. Because it, again, like you said, it's a poison. I mean, you've got to lance the boil. You can't just let it there and poke at it, and you got to lance it to let it heal. I've never understood that personally.
Les Brown said something that I think really kind of typifies everything you and I are talking about. Somebody else's opinion of you is none of your business, said Les Brown. Somebody else's opinion of you is none of your business. And when you think about being in the business of forgiveness, you suddenly see the world that way. Like, what they said about me. Like, for example, in the chat, you were talking about chat a bit ago, there have been some really kind of negative, that mostly I would say is positive comments towards your and my conversation, mostly. But every now and then I would run across one. And somebody make a negative comment, as I'm about to appear on your show or during my appearance on the show. And I could focus on that. But you know what? That person's upset. It's none of my business. In fact, I don't even look anymore. It's like, it's fine. It's none of my business. And I like what Seth Godin, the author, said. He goes, I haven't checked a book review of mine in almost 10 years. And he said, because it's none of my business. Not one-star review of a book has ever made an author better. And you start thinking about the people that go out and online and almost anonymously, not always, but sometimes it's anonymous, and it feels that way through the keyboard, say some horrible things, and haven't you as well? I have, and I don't participate in social media anymore, but I did say even 8-10 years ago, I'd make a comment about it, be it a politician. It was never a personal thing. It was always a politician or something like that. But still, like, would I have walked up and said to Mark Begich something that I might? Well, in fact, I did. I interviewed him a number of years ago, and I told him right from the start that I don't want to be doing this. I'm doing this for a friend. I don't like you, and I didn't vote for you, and I hold you accountable for having ruined our healthcare in this country with you being the 60th vote for Obamacare. Right. Anyway, but by the end of it, I said, boy, I did not want to like you, but you're a charming person.
He's a likable guy. Yeah. Yeah, no,
he is.
And that's part of the problem, is that we've reached this point to where outrage and angst and hurt and offense has become the norm. I mean, it is the internet, right? Somebody said something like, well, did you see I posted this? And I'm like, have you seen the internet? Right? Have you been on social? Like you said, I'm very rarely, I do social media for the show, But other than that, I'm very rarely do much with social media on my own. And I don't really ever post anything super offensive or anything that I really care about, because I know that somebody's going to take it the wrong way, the right way, or whatever. But whatever I post out there, people are just they're going to shred you, right? Because that's the anonymity of the internet, makes people bold, and you could get your feelings hurt, and nobody needs that. And again, if you hold on to that kind of stuff, it's just gonna hurt you more than anything else.
Yeah. It's going to grow inside of you, the resentment. And we know, I mean, one of the greatest detriments of our health is our mental health. Our physical health is very affected by our mental health. And our mental health is most affected when we spend a lot of time worrying about things that are outside of our control, or what people have said about or to you, or you think, and suddenly we bifurcate the world into, this side is evil, this side can do no wrong. And suddenly you realize, wait a minute, actually, I can't really tell policy wise a whole lot of difference between Senator Lindsey Graham and former Senator Kamala Harris, now Vice President. Policy-wise, they're kind of right in the same boat. I can't really tell. Is the world really split down the middle like this? And when you get into the business of forgiveness, suddenly you see those comments online or whatever, and you go, oh, I understand. This person's playing a character or a role, or I can forgive them for their ignorance, because I truly believe Bernie Sanders, just to bring it back political for you for a minute, I think Bernie Sanders truly believes what he spews. I truly mean that. I think he really believes it. And then, so I can forgive him of his ignorance, that he just doesn't know any better. But people who are faking and pretending, okay, I better forgive them too, but I better beware. So it doesn't mean you're Pollyannic and bury your head and you become a doormat. You just start to see the world through, okay, I can forgive them of this. I'm not going to hold on to that grudge. I'll go my end of the stick, but I'll be watchful and careful. And I'm going to speak the truth when I think it needs to be said.
Right. And I think that there's a whole industry out there that's taking advantage of people holding on to their grudges and not forgiving. I think there's a whole industry. I think there's a whole political spectrum on both sides. Like you said, Mark Begich is a very nice guy. He's a very likable guy. And I totally disagree with almost every one of his policies, but he's a guy that I could have lunch with and have an enjoyable lunch, and at the same time totally disagree with him and forgive him for not agreeing with me. But we're taught today not to let that happen. Chris, less than 30 seconds. Give me your final thoughts.
So get into the business of forgiveness today. It not only does it rhyme, but it feels good, and everybody around you is going to benefit. Even if you just forgive yourself today for something you did or thought or should have done or thought yesterday. Start with you.
Forgiveness starts with you. That's what I like. Forgiving yourself first and then moving on from there. Thank you, Chris Story. Folks, that's why I always say be kind, love one another, live well. Hold the line, Chris. We'll be back tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show. Well, Chris didn't hold on, but I forgive him. I forgive him for that. I do. I forgive him for that. He didn't need to, it was just one of those things. He didn't mean to. It's okay. I forgive him. All right, my friends. Well, we're out of time for today. Tomorrow's another one. Kevin McCabe and Mike Shower will be joining us tomorrow. We'll be talking to both of them about the state of the state and more coming on. Again, if you haven't gone over to Rumble yet, go to my channel on Rumble, The Michael Dukes Show, and check it out, and make sure you follow us there, just in case I ever get kicked off of, Facebook or YouTube or both. I've just dropped links in the chat rooms for Facebook and YouTube. You can go over there and look and just click on the follow button down at the bottom underneath the video. Right where you'd find it on YouTube. Same kind of thing. All right, my friends, gotta go. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Dukes Show.